This is Making It Here and There. Welcome to the show.
Mark Davis is the founder and CEO of the Negotiation Initiative, an executive consultancy firm that coaches and advises clients on how to utilize cultural intelligence to generate profitability alongside diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Negotiation Initiative works directly with organizations to aid them through acquisitions, mergers, expansion, hiring and retention, procurement, sales, and other relevant business fields. With cultural intelligence as the backbone of their work, the Negotiation Initiative ensures that everyone's voices are recognized and valued in the workplace, and especially at the negotiation table. You can learn more about the Negotiation Initiative at negotiationinitiative.com.
Thank you, Mark, so much for joining Making It Here and There. First of all, I'm excited to have my first UK guest. And I've been looking at the Negotiation Initiative, and I just really want to talk about all the really cool things you're working on and how you started this company. So thank you again for joining.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's as is typical in the UK. It's spring and it's miserable outside. So no, it's good to be with you.
You have to come to New Jersey. It's going to be 90 degrees tomorrow. So I don't actually. You don't use those. You don't use those temperatures, right? I guess it's over 30 degrees then.
So. Yeah. So you did in Fahrenheit and we did in Celsius. So yeah, that's about 30 degrees, give or take.
A little bit over 30. Yeah. So if you want to come here and bake, you're more than welcome.
If I could get back in, I was in New York actually last week.
Oh, really?
As it happens. Yeah. So but I don't know if I'll be getting back there anytime soon. But yes, it's way better weather there than it is here.
Well, thank you again for joining, and let's just jump right into it. Why don't you just tell everybody what just about the Negotiation Initiative? How can a company find you? How can a company hire you? What's the purpose? What's your mission statement? And what are your outcomes from your company?
All right, sure. Yeah, there's plenty to unpack there. So I mean, people can find us on the the usual sort of channels. So we have the website negotiationinitiative.com. You can email either me, which is mark@cqnegotiator.com, or probably advice@cqnegotiator.com is better. It gets picked up sooner. And yeah, we're on Instagram and LinkedIn. But we've been around now about 3 years, give or take. And I suppose there are 3, maybe 4 types of clients that come to us. There are those that have, by the way, we generally work in sort of the B2B space. I do some advisory and coaching kind of for executives one-on-one, but generally we work in that sort of training and advisory space. So they'll come to us normally if they have quite an established graduate program, let's say, and they're a large company. They come to us to say, we've done a lot of the same training that our competitors or clients have done, and we're looking for sort of an extra edge, and that's kind of what my company provides. Or they have a lot of clients that are international, and so the geography plays into it, and they're finding it's a bit of a struggle just to understand practice and how their clients do business. The third way, which is probably the bulk of the work that we do at the moment, is companies that have merged or teams that have merged, and there's just a very different approach to how they communicate, how they do business, and they're just not understanding each other, and that's challenging their profitability or ability to deliver. So that tends to be the type of client that we have. The other that's become more prevalent as well is those companies that have done unconscious bias training or some sort of diversity and inclusion training, and it isn't delivering the results they thought it would deliver, or in fact it's gotten worse as a result of doing that training. So there, I suppose, the 3 or 4 buckets that we are in, and some of the problems we try and solve.
So you're based in the UK, but you work internationally, correct?
Yeah. Most of it is through referral.
Okay.
And it's I mean, language barrier aside, yeah, we will go and work wherever the clients are. So I have one particular client who's west coast of the US, but they have Chinese, Chinese business units and customers in Asia, and we'll jump in and try and help them when we can.
Now, what prompted you to start the negotiation initiative?
Yeah, it's a good one. How did it start? So I'd worked for a consultancy that focused purely on negotiation capability, and I've been there for about 5 years. And over that time, two things kept coming up with existing clients. One was, this is great, but what do you do with this particular scenario in this, with this cultural scenario, and how would you deal with people in Japan? We've just opened a new office in India, and we are finding that negotiating with our suppliers or customers there is really difficult. How do you deal with this? And we'd give very platitudinal answers, or we kind of half answer the question but not really deal with it. And then the second thing that kept coming up was, we love what you do, but it hasn't changed in 25, 30 years. Kind of what's next? What are you bringing to us that's going to be different? And I felt consistently weren't really answering those two questions for our clients. So after a while, with a bit of pushing and shoving from a mentor, I took the plunge and moved into that space. Not thinking about culture actually, but just thinking there must be another solution. There must be another way of approaching negotiation and communication that someone hasn't thought of. And I just set out trying to find that.
And I think you touched on something that's really even just important, that the times are changing, so you have to change as well. I mean, not just you, but even companies and just attitudes, and everything just kind of changes. So you can't just be giving the same answers you gave. I mean, regardless of anything 30 years ago, because things are different from 30 years ago, even just business techniques and technology and everything changes. So if you're using that same mind, everything's, like I said, I think that's really important. I think that's something that you touched on.
Yeah, I think it's the advancing technology has, and so therefore our interconnectedness, which is something you could debate whether we're more connected because of technology or not. But let's park that. There's more visibility of difference, and particularly with some of the clients, and I was very lucky to deal with and manage some global brands. They're up and coming future leaders, the millennials, the Gen Zs, just wanted something different from us. And I felt we weren't answering or pivoting to it quickly enough. So things have changed a lot, and people want more from their personal relationships, certainly, but definitely their professional relationships. And that doesn't mean at the expense of profitability and innovation, but they just want something more than what was offered 30 years ago.
Now, you said that originally you didn't go into starting the negotiation initiative with cultural intelligence in mind. So so you would say that like it was just examples of folks saying that they were looking to expand internationally or in different cultural sectors, or was there any like specific moment that said, okay, well, that's really what I want to focus on, is that cultural intelligence factor?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So I had an open attention to wanting to find something different, but I knew the answer was people are looking for something that offers more depth, gives them more capacity and ability to adapt to the changing environment, in corporate America, and globally, and certainly across Europe. But I didn't know until I bumped into it, figuratively speaking, that cultural intelligence was the vector for that. I almost took a blank sheet of paper and said, if I'd never worked for this organization and I just came to negotiation, what is it that I would want it to be able to offer? And so the moment was, I actually attended as a participant a Leading with Cultural Intelligence program.
Okay.
And it was, a bit of a cliche, but a sort of light bulb went off when They explained what it was, what cultural intelligence was, and to me, it dovetailed so perfectly with negotiation capability, and actually would enhance negotiation capability, that it was inevitable that I'd move into that space. So that was October of 2019, I think, or maybe even 2018. I can't remember now. Pre-pandemic.
Pre-pandemic. So you could, if you don't mind, if you could just tell the audience what cultural intelligence is, and why it's important, and why we need to expand that part of our brain.
Sure. So cultural intelligence, I suppose, if you looked it up in a textbook, would say something like the capability to relate and function effectively in a variety or in all cultural settings. And I suppose the other way of putting that is it's your ability to treat others as they would wish to be treated. Now, I think for clarity, what I mean by culture is that which is accepted and familiar to a group that would self-identify.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be anything from people who work at Walmart in procurement, to people who love heavy metal rock, to what it means, to order tea in Japan, and everything in between.
Yes.
So I want to stress that it's not necessarily and only something that's geographical or language sort of based. It's generational. It can be driven by gender, by sexual orientation, certainly by race, ethnicity, all those things. But that's what it means. I suppose, why is it relevant? I think it kind of links back to what we mentioned before, but I think that so much of our understanding of one another has always been based in culture, but up until cultural intelligence was recognized as an intellectual sort of capability, there wasn't a label you could put to it.
Mm-hmm.
And people allowed themselves, I think, to conform to stereotypes, or were influenced by stereotypes, and that generally has been to the detriment of society at large, but certainly organizations. They're constantly looking for ways to drive profitability, and I suppose the work I'm doing is of a time, and it's quite what's what I'm looking for, prescient now, because of what's going on at a macro level. But the idea that you could understand someone and then be able to behave in a way that treats them the way they would wish to be treated, is just a way to be more profitable, to be more successful, just in and of itself, rather than doing it purely for selfish reasons, which a lot of companies, I think, are doing. Right, it's very popular to do those courses right now, and it's popular, and it's probably something that the vast majority of people are doing for that reason. It doesn't mean it's not a good thing, but it's probably the driver for many. And I think the other thing I would say is a lot of what is happening now in terms of how people communicate is more international, is done much more remotely. And cultural intelligence is a way to ensure that you aren't led by your biases, and you aren't led by that fear of difference, and you can control it as opposed to being controlled by it. So
let's go through a little scenario. So let's say a company decides, and then you can make up the company whatever you want, but let's say a company decides to work with a negotiation initiative. What kind of research would you do for this client, or what type of guidance would you provide this client? What does that look like?
What does it look like? It's a good question. So it looks like initially we go to we look to insight, and so how would we do that? We look at cultural readiness of an organization. So I suppose there's two things going on.
Right.
There's a client would come to me with a problem. My team is failing to negotiate successfully enough with our customers in China. We have the same customer in the US, and we have the one in China, and we're struggling to understand why things are going okay in the US but not in China. So we would look at a cultural readiness, and that entails a psychometric test, because cultural intelligence is something you can measure and it's something you can improve. So we begin by looking at this psychometric test, and I'd sit down with the client and say, okay, based on the tests of the participants or the team that you want us to work with, we can look at their motivation, is where we'd start. There are other factors you look at, but I always start with motivation, because if motivation to want to change or to do things differently is low, it will determine how you plan and prepare the engagement with that customer. Having done that, we then look at 5 areas really that we want to focus on. The first of them being a power dynamic. I think the most important thing that people underestimate is that culture pervades every single decision that you make. And a negotiation is ultimately a conflict to a greater or lesser extent between 2 different cultures that want to create value. And we often fear what we don't understand. So when we get to a place where in our discussion with the client, ultimately we say, well, look, what do you want to achieve here? It will be that they want to create something that they haven't created before with a new customer. Well, that's going to breed conflict, and a conflict is about a power struggle. What the testing allows us to do is create 5 areas that we focus on. The first is power and trust. And what that allows us to establish is, well, look, there are normally 2 ways that people want to resolve conflict. They want to look at integrity, or they want to look at competence. And what we've created is a lexicon and a framework that allows people to look at power and trust, to look at how they manage their risk, how they manage time with their customers, an approach to fairness, and then how they communicate all of that. And we will sit down and take each of our customers through that process. And it isn't that it's right and wrong, good or bad. It's that within each of those areas, you will have a preference, and your client or customer will have a particular preference.
Very interesting. Now, have you ever looked at an instance where, like, you had a client, I'm going to use this as an example, like say they did an acquisition. So now you have company A acquired company B. So you have folks from company A and company B come to you, and then you do assessments on both parties.
Right.
And then try to mesh it, or, try to work with those 2 parties in a way. Have you ever had that instance happen?
Yeah. So, I mean, that often will be the makeup you end up having, whether it is a merger or it's a negotiation. Very often that there's just, let's say, 3 parties involved.
Okay.
At least 2, but often 3 parties involved. So I'll give you one example without disclosing any sort of particular details. But so there is this company I work with out of the West Coast, and they are dealing with 2 customers. One is based in the US, and the other is based in China. Now, they have an issue, which is that they're trying to put contracts together, but one of the problems is how the Chinese company approaches power in negotiation. They look at power as something that is much more collectivist in its approach, and is something that is much more about the idea of being able to have a win-win scenario, versus their American customer, who is very much more about the individualist idea and this idea of win-lose. And so you've got 2 different approaches to how you'd manage conflict and how you'd resolve dispute. So we might say, well, look, with the contract with your American customer, you need to look at rebuilding trust based on metrics that look at individual accountability. So if there's an issue that arises or there's a dispute that needs resolving, they will look at trust being rebuilt through the eyes of you being able to show a level of competence and accountability at a personal level. With your Chinese customer, because they are much more collectivist in how they approach negotiation, they will want to see that you recognize protecting the relationship as a whole and being responsible for the situation we are in as a partnership in wanting to rebuild that negotiation and that relationship. And so you would write a contract slightly differently, and you would have slightly different KPIs for that contract based on that different power dynamic.
It's really interesting. And it's funny you mentioned that about Western approaches to negotiation, because I took a negotiation class in college, and the professor said, well, the outcome you want is win-lose.
Yeah.
So it's funny, it's funny you said that. I was like, oh yeah, win-lose. You don't want win-win, because then you're compromising. So you don't want compromise. You want to win. You want to get as much. You want to get as close to everything you want, if not everything you want. So it's funny. I was
that's not, it's not right and wrong. It's just a cultural preference to how we approach it. So what we've managed to do, I believe, is just establish a language and a framework that allows people to understand. It's a framework that people can understand, that allows them to understand other cultures. And it gives people a way of communicating it. Because ultimately, the reason the company exists is to be able to empower people to recognize one another's humanity more readily. And I think one of the things that people struggle with is, because we all have bias and we all have prejudice, is it's not giving into that bias and prejudice. When we're faced with conflict. A lot of this work we do is based off the fact that people normally come to us when there's an issue. When things are going well and everyone's making money and relationships are solid, we tend not to look at culture either at all, or we don't even see that there is cultural difference, because everyone's happy. It's only a problem.
Everyone's making money.
Everyone's making money.
Everyone's making money.
But it's only a problem when there's an issue that arises, and all of a sudden the very amicable relationship we had and the full recognition we have of the value someone brings kind of goes out the window when our safety, is threatened, or our profitability is under threat. So that's normally when we're called in. And
that'd be really interesting if you were hired or asked to kind of not intervene, but to step in earlier, right? To step in before there's the issue. That would be the next. I mean, I'm sure you know this. I'm not saying anything you don't already know, but almost if you know that there's a merger coming, or if I don't know how to say this, but like if you knew something was coming, or just if you know things are good, it'd be interesting just to do an assessment. Where do people stand right now? Is there something in the brewing that you don't know, that, like you said? I'm thinking of the company that I work for, and again, I'm not disclosing anything, but I'm just thinking of I work for a very, very large company, and they always say it's really true. The folks at the top don't really know what goes on the ground floor. And and like you said, there's a lot of things that have been going on, like you said, at a macro level. And it's nice to say, like, well, we're just going to throw in some unconscious bias training, or we're just going to start doing some DEI initiatives. And, sometimes it just doesn't stick, because you're not looking at the tactical reasons why folks maybe have this bias. You said the motivation and the things that are brewing on the ground floor or mid-level. So it's interesting. It'd be interesting to have someone like the negotiation initiative, like, kind of step in, just do assessments. I don't know how you would do that. I'm sure it's something we're looking at.
Well, we would rather that, and this is, I think, one of the problems with some of the labels that are out there at the moment. And by some of the labels, I mean, when you think about unconscious bias or diversity, equity, inclusion, it assumes that it's connected to something that's happened externally. So taking what has gone on across the planet. And it's easy to reference George Floyd, but the refugee crisis that we had on the shores of Calais a few years ago, all these things, it's easy to use these labels to offset accountability to the fact that these things are external. I suppose the point I'm making is that everyone's a unique cultural being, and if companies did just take a sort of internal audit you'd see huge divergence and difference anyway. Even without the external pressure that's probably been brought on, not probably, that has been brought on by the events that have gone on in the last 18 months, 2 years. And as I say, CQ is something that you can measure, but you can improve. And to that end, if you've got an organization, let's say you have got leadership that is, very open to change and wants to drive change because it's a good thing to do, and yes, of course, it will drive profitability, but they want to do it because they feel they want a cultural shift. Mm-hmm. That's all well and good. But if a large majority of your staff have low drive in that area of cultural intelligence, it's telling you that they don't want to change. They don't want to do it. So this is where I say, yes, we come in and we assess initially by looking at motivation, because you've got to have a negotiation with your employees, with your leadership, that they will accept the change that you're trying to put through the company, or you're trying to negotiate with them to drive this initiative forward, because it won't work otherwise. It's got to happen. They've got to want it to happen for them rather than it to happen to them.
How would you be able to I don't want to say incentivize, because that's not really the right word, but how would somebody who maybe has low motivation change, or is that even possible? Now I'm digging deep, but
no, it's certainly possible. I mean, we would take a cohort, and if they were very low on their drive, well, there's, getting into some of the weeds of it, there are 3 areas that you could focus on, and it may be that they are highly motivated culturally within the organization just by the external sort of factors. So it may be that you need to relook at your reward scheme for your sales team, right? And that they're not motivated to change their behavior because actually the KPIs you've got in place are incentivizing them not to do that. Mm-hmm. If you monetize a change in behavior to align with what you want to see them doing differently, then you would get that result. Mm-hmm. If it's much more about their internal sort of intrinsic factors, a good example of that in a very broad brushstrokes might be, I have a client who moved from a very well-known global energy brand drink to a different energy brand drink that has a very different makeup, has a very different ethos. But for him, he moved for those intrinsic motivational reasons. He moved for what the brand stands for.
Right.
And that was the motivation for him. So when you get into the weeds of it, I suppose where we really come in is to make tangible those things that seem intangible. And you can't do that without a baseline. You can't do that without understanding where you're coming from. So it's not easy to implement, but we've got a set of tools that make it easy to identify where the pain points might be. We all have negotiation traits, and they can all be measured, and we all have preferences. And what CQ does is allow you to put a vector together that says, okay, you have these preferences, and CQ is the way that you can stretch and move and adapt your preferences in any given circumstance, depending on what's in front of you. And we just advise and coach and teach people how to do that.
One other thing I wanted to ask you was, you had said that, you might get clients, for instance, they say their DEI initiatives failed or are not working. How would that, I'm curious what that looks like, because I feel like, again, I only know what I know from the company I work for, but I'm curious. And in some ways I feel like there's a lot of force feeding of these types of things. And like you said, if you're not, it's like, and it's very quick and, I say quick and dirty. I don't want to use that word, but I just did. I did. I like it.
I like it, by the way.
God, it's recorded. Yeah. No, but it's it's like what's funny, like one day they sent us an email. This is pre-COVID. They sent us an email like, all right, well, you have to go to this meeting, actually it was at a theater, as a performance center. We had to go there and sit in this unconscious bias training. Came out of nowhere.
Right.
And And then we found out, like, well, they're doing this because of some internal things that they've realized. And then, like you said, and then all of a sudden it's like,
Right.
I don't know. I'm curious what that looks like. Like what's a good DNI? What's bad DNI? I don't know. I'm curious.
No, it's great to have the conversation. There's no sort of right and wrong way to go about this. So I'm happy to get into the weeds. So everything starts with, in my opinion, and where we've had success where others haven't, is that DE&I, unconscious bias, they are all they all have credibility.
Mm-hmm.
They are all viable as a means of trying to be more inclusive, and by extension, we all want to be better people, right? I mean, I'm not that naive, but let's take it at a very kind of holistic level. So, but the problem is there hasn't been a good enough answer to the so what. Okay, I've done unconscious bias training, or I've done some sort of D&I initiative. Okay, like so what? So I know that I've got 150 biases and everyone has them. But what on earth do I do about that on a day-to-day level?
Now?
How? Yeah, exactly. What does that mean? And so you have all, particularly people, let's say, who perceive themselves as being, white and privileged. They're treading on eggshells because they know they've got these biases, but like, what do I do about it? And on the flip side of it, I have some clients who, have a lot of Black, Asian or minority employees. And the danger is that those employees, use it and spin it to race all the time. Mm-hmm. Neither of those avenues and narratives are helpful. What I have attempted to do is remove race and actually diversity and equity and inclusion out of the equation altogether, and said, everyone is a unique cultural being, whether you're Black, white, yellow, pink, green, or red, whatever your orientation, however old you are. And this is a framework that allows you to begin by understanding that any interaction, negotiation, or communication begins with understanding where the balance of power lies and how power is perceived by those two cultures, let's say, that are attempting to negotiate. Mm-hmm. So I come back to your example where, this unconscious bias training was sort of forced upon you. Well, let me ask you the question. Were you at any point engaged and asked whether or not you actually wanted to have the training done and be part of the training? Right, no. So right there and then there's a conflict, right? There's a conflict because there's a certain amount of autonomy that you want to feel that you should have, even though you're an employee, and they've taken that away from you. So you've got a conflict right there. Mm-hmm. You've got a power struggle that's going to take place. So what we would have done differently with the leadership looking to initiate unconscious bias training is to say, well, you need to have a negotiation as a leader, preferably one-to-one, but certainly with your senior management one-to-one, and maybe them one-to-one with their direct reports, and so on, that asks permission to have the training initiated in the first place. Right. Because when people have their power challenged, they tend to go one of two ways. They either look at power, as you've said, in a very win-lose dynamic, in which case it's a no, like, I'm not even going to compromise on this. I'm not going to do the training. No, win-lose. And so you either then have to force the training on them because that's how you respond to, right, to conflict.
Yeah, too bad.
Or it goes the other way and you have a very conformist, slightly more, let's say, again, for the want of stereotypes, Chinese or Asian way of approaching it, which is there's high power distance. I'm being told by my employee that I'm going to do this training and I'm used to that dynamic culturally, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. It still doesn't mean you're going to get engagement in the right way, but it's just a cultural norm that we conform to or we don't conform to. Mm-hmm. So we would come in and assess that right away. Because the other thing I want to stress here as we bounce kind of around the topic is that this framework is there to address bias, and it's a starting point for understanding bias and stereotype. It doesn't offer you an excuse to reaffirm your biases or stereotypes, because you could have people who are Chinese and work for a Chinese organization, but they are very, very win-lose orientated. and very, very much on the spectrum, all about competence and individual autonomy. So the point is that what we give you is a framework that allows you to understand someone on a very individual level, and in fact not to lean into the bias. Have it as a sense check, but then ask yourself a series of questions that challenge that bias and in fact might give you cause to move away from it. So that's one example of many. So that phase will be one. And then you've got to look at others. So risk, and what I mean by risk is we would say to your leadership, well, look, you're gonna initiate something that, yes, it's good, but it's change and people are scared of change. So there's going to be a certain level of risk involved in that. Now, we might find that doing our research that 70% of your company in one particular office are really high risk tolerance. So they aren't going to mind the change that you're going to instigate. But the other 30% are really, 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 really low risk tolerance. They are high risk avoidance, like no matter what. So it might be prudent in how you communicate with them that you do it very differently because of those two reasons. And we would help draft a series of communications as to, how you go about doing that differently. And I'm oversimplifying, so forgive me. And I can keep going, and you look at how you manage time, you look at perceptions of fairness, and then you look at your modes of communication. And depending on people's preferences and perspectives, we would advise and manage leadership as how they're going to actually roll out an unconscious bias bit of training, for example.
I mean, I think it's so crazy. Like, you don't think about all these little nuances with even just like you said, approaching training. And again, like, I think it's a very cultural thing. People think, well, you like it, too bad, but I think it's interesting when you give people the freedom of choice, how many would still just do it because you at least allowed them to make that choice. They'll say, well, you're letting me choose. Well, maybe I will just do it. I don't know. I mean, I know you said it depends on obviously it depends on every single person.
It does. It's very difficult in the abstract. And it's even now I'm reflecting on some of the things I've said to you earlier, and I would want to say it differently because without a specific example, it's very difficult kind of explain it in the abstract.
Yes.
But you're right. Remember, every negotiation, or pretty much is about two people coming together to try to create something that didn't exist before. So you're by definition, you're stepping into the unknown, and how a 70-year-old, white heterosexual male will think about that, who's only ever lived and worked in Texas, versus how a 20-year-old, Afro mixed race, Indo-Chinese, trans person, who's lived in South Korea and Norway but has been educated in the UK will think about that, are going to be vastly different. And so what I've realized is that you've got to ask permission of both of those types of individual to come to the table willing to want to do business. Up until now, there's been no universal language or framework that's allowed both those individuals to come to the table at the same time and understand one another. And I believe that's what we've created.
What do you think the most important takeaway is from your work and negotiation initiative?
Yeah, that's a good one.
I know. I mean, we went over a lot of this too, but it's like,
it's okay.
I think it's hard because it's very optimistic. It seems like.
Yeah. I think that the main takeaway, I suppose, would be that culture pervades every facet of what we do day in, day out. And with that being the case, I think what the biggest takeaway is to start with the idea that both parties are coming into it from a place of mistrust. And the only way that we can build a foundation of trust is by acknowledging that culture also pervades that perception in every single way that you can think of. So negotiation and culture aren't mutually exclusive. They're actually the bedfellows of a power dynamic. And if you start with accepting that, forget race or or ethnicity or diversity or inclusion don't forget them. Know that they're a feature of something that is culturally, what's the word I'm looking for? It's probably not culturally significant, but culturally inevitable. That there's going to be a clash of cultures. And if you start with recognizing that there's a power dynamic at play, and in order to really understand that power dynamic, you have to understand culture, you can come at it a little bit more dispassionately. Because the biggest problems we face is when we have a clash or we have a conflict and emotion overrides our decision making, and all of that comes from a place of cultural difference. And I think that's the biggest problem we have, certainly with organizations. When there's real clashes, it's normally a miscommunication or misunderstanding that's steeped in some cultural misalignment that started maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago, a year ago, and has been bubbling along. And only when there's a conflict do you realize there's been a misunderstanding, all along. So it's kind of a long-winded way to say that,
I think culture is one of those things too. It's very eludes people. Like, I think it's just so high level. I feel like it's one of those words that gets used all the time.
Right.
It's kind of like the go-to word for excuses, but also in positive and negative ways, right? But then I also think people, at the same time, if you ask anybody, walk down the street, ask anybody in all different countries, it doesn't matter who you ask, children, adults, elderly people, what does culture mean? Nobody's going to be able to give you, first of all, no one's going to give you the same answer, but I don't even know if people, I don't think even when you think of folks who've done the research, there is no one answer. So it's a very elusive idea that, like I say, it gets used a lot, but nobody really can actually define it. So I think that's where people get lost.
It's difficult. I think, if we were to re-edit this, or I wanted a re-edited answer, the simplest way, the biggest takeaway would be that culture is nothing more than what is accepted and familiar to a particular group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happens that by definition, there are very few cultures that to you personally are accepted and familiar. So you've got very little to work with when it comes to having certainty.
Mm-hmm.
There's only so much certainty you can have around your own culture. So it's about what's accepted and familiar. And if you recognize that, you can probably start to come at negotiation and communication generally with a little bit more of a level head. It's nothing more than that. But unfortunately, we live in a world where people want certainty. And unfortunately, culture by definition just isn't going to give you certainty.
Do you think we should be able to get certain with the uncertain? I know that seems like very...
I think there's something in cultural intelligence being probably the latest way of getting to the unknown unknowns.
Known unknowns.
You know what I mean? I think that's the best way of looking at it. If you have an open attention to what's going on and you use cultural intelligence and those traits as a way of uncovering things that you didn't even know were there, that's a good way of looking at it, most definitely. But it's still in its infancy. A lot of my time is spent giving people a definition of cultural intelligence, and giving them the space to kind of understand that as a concept, let alone then use it to generate greater profitability and, greater prosperity. So it's a long road ahead, but, that's why we do these sorts of things, and that's what the company's all about.
And I think too, I do have hope, and I'm sure you do too, for as generations continue to enter the workforce. I feel like, I at least have hope. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I feel
I think it will. How it will manifest is difficult, to know.
Of course.
Certainly, if you look at the culture in tech and what's happening with AI and things like that, which is I'm interested in. It can be quite scary, but look, I think cultural intelligence is an extension of, IQ was something that, that was around very early on, your intellectual kind of capability. EQ, had its day and is still a very big thing that came around, in the 80s and 90s. Your emotional intellect, your emotional capacity, and cultural intelligence is that sort of your intercultural ability. And I do think, it's got strong enough roots and foundations. I do think people are going to, start to lean towards it. So fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So what's next for the negotiation initiative?
Yeah, so there's I suppose 3 things coming up in the short to medium term. We are expanding into the States. I mentioned, we have a partnership we're trying, to finalize and is ongoing with the Cultural Intelligence Center based in Michigan. And there's another partnership I'm establishing with a European partner and associate as well, to try and move things kind of in that direction. And to make head and tail of all this, which I've attempted to do in this past hour, we've got a book I'm in the middle of writing. Ooh. I'm speaking to a couple of agents, like for representation and things, but there seems to be a little bit of interest bubbling up there. But it's about trying to chart the journey really, and where culture fits into negotiation, and the title of it is Culture Negotiated. So it's this idea that culture is actually really intrinsic to developing and deepening relationships, as opposed to being an obstacle to overcome or circumvent. The idea that we should celebrate and leverage difference. So that's happening as well.
And I think that's great. I mean, you're gonna have to come back and talk about your book when it's either supposed to be published or published.
We'll see. Hopefully it's writing the thing that's the issue. The issue. Don't know how long I'm going to give myself. I need to be more militant with that.
Well, it's funny you say that, because the next guest I have on for next week, anyway, I say this next week. It's by the time this all gets published, but she's about writing a book and like getting the book published, and so it's funny you say that, because I can understand. I say, I want to write. I have all these ideas for books, and getting it on paper is just like, why? I don't know why it's so hard, but you're going to get it. I think you're closer than me, so you're good.
Yeah, I think you have to accept that you're discovering it as you're creating it, and so those 2 things are happening at the same time.
Right. Now I had one more question. I had a secret question. So your logo is an octopus,
right?
Which has the N and an I kind of tentacles. Where did you get the idea for the octopus?
I was looking for a symbol or something emblematic, and I played around with a few things, just like with initials and just letters on their own, and nothing was really working. And I was watching, it may have been Discovery Channel or an Attenborough or something like that, and the octopus came up, and the strap line for the company is profitability, alongside diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the premise of the company is really about being open to adapting and accepting of all versions of humanity. And I suppose the octopus link is that it's an incredibly smart, intelligent animal, and it adapts to its environment, it survives, and it is both, I suppose, sort of untainted by, years of evolution, but also, is extremely still misunderstood. And so I like kind of the mystery behind it, but the fact that it has a, this ability to adapt and survive in all sorts of environments. And, if you watch enough YouTube, you'll see they have problem-solving capacity, but, they will kill sharks if they have to, they're just incredible. So, but I got a bit too carried away with it, actually. And so she has a name as well.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So her name is Maud, and she's called Maud because I really did get too carried away with this. It's ridiculous. Because the name of the actress who played Octopussy in the Bond film, her first name is Maud. So, we went way too far with it. It's completely ridiculous.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, Mark. I appreciate
My
it.
pleasure.
Again, real quick, how can they can find you? They can go on your website, right? What it's
Yeah, negotiationinitiative.com. They can find us there. I'm on LinkedIn, so the URL is / is the cultured negotiator. Instagram is the cultured negotiator as well. So those are the best places. Or email, which is advice@cqnegotiator.com, and if people want to know more. But that's where I am. That's where I'm hanging out.
Thank you again, and I can't wait to hear about the book, and I can't wait. So you're gonna have to come back.
I'd love to. No, happy to do that. That'd be great.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in. If you are interested in being interviewed for Making It Here and There, please send an email to MIHATpodcast@gmail.com.
Making It Here and There is an interview series focusing on ways in which individuals are using communication across borders and across cultures to achieve understanding, learning, and overall consciousness of the world around us.